The neoclassical view of the economy opened the door for a new era of economic policy. Where once governments merely made decisions about taxes to fund government programs, now decisions about spending and taxes had broader implications. Government could use fiscal policy to impact the overall health of the economy, and they had two targets in their sights. They were the same targets as given to the Federal Reserve, keeping both unemployment and inflation in check. Ideally, governments would try to set their economic policies to keep unemployment low and prices stable. But our ASAD model has some bad news on that front. On the left, I have the ASAD model set to start with low aggregate demand. On the right, I have a new graph, which will chart the relationship between the inflation rate on the vertical axis and the unemployment rate on the horizontal one. So each point plotted corresponds to some possible pairing of inflation and unemployment. Our hope is to find a point which is close to the origin, with low inflation and low unemployment. But when we move aggregate demand with government policies, it increases both the price level and real GDP. The further we go, the faster the price level rises, meaning higher and higher inflation. But the corresponding increases in real GDP mean more production, which means more people will be employed to carry out that production. The points plotted on the right show the predicted relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. It is downward sloping, meaning that there is a trade-off, at least in the short run, between inflation and unemployment. The lower we push unemployment, the higher we push up inflation. This inverse relationship is called the Phillips Curve, named after the New Zealand economist William Phillips, who first studied it. Phillips didn't actually use the ASAD model to spot this relationship. He just gathered data on it. Each point here shows the inflation and unemployment rates experienced in the United States during the 1960s. For example, the point here shows that in 1961, the unemployment rate in the US was around 6.7%, while the inflation rate was low at under 1%. Alternatively, at the end of the decade, in 1969, unemployment had fallen to just under 3.5%, but inflation was up to nearly 6%. The inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment is plain to see from the data, and similar patterns were found in other industrialized economies. This finding was another mark in favor of the Keynesian framework. But the question remained as to whether or not the relationship could be sustained for long periods of time. In the long run, the economy should return to the full employment level of GDP. But this doesn't mean it should get unemployment down to zero. Remember, we have three kinds of unemployment. Frictional unemployment is common and mostly harmless. At any given time, there will be some people in the process of finding a job. That process takes time, but this kind of unemployment isn't a problem so long as there is a job available for every job seeker. Structural unemployment is more pernicious and is unemployment that arises due to economic growth and innovation. We want our economy to continuously grow, and the innovations required to make that happen will necessarily mean that people employed in obsolete jobs will become unemployed. If the economy is healthy, other jobs in different industries or roles are available, but they might require difficult adjustments like retraining or lower pay for a time. Then there is cyclical unemployment, which arises due to a recession brought on by insufficient aggregate demand. Cyclical unemployment happens only when there aren't enough jobs available for everyone seeking a job. In a healthy economy, we would still expect to see frictional and structural unemployment, but we would expect there to be enough job openings to employ everyone once they get things sorted out. These two types of unemployment form what we call the natural rate of unemployment. It is the unemployment rate we would see when the economy is at full employment, meaning there is a job for everyone who wants one, and cyclical unemployment is at zero. Our ASAD model says that the economy will move to potential GDP and full employment in the long run. That means in the long run, the economy will see its natural rate of unemployment. This implies that the Phillips curve will only hold in the short run. Over the long run, unemployment will revert to its natural rate. This means the short-run Phillips curve might move around with changes in aggregate supply, and we cannot rely on the data from the 1960s to form the basis of future policy. But with the ASAD model, policymakers might be able to anticipate those changes and adjust accordingly. What is the long run if not a series of short runs? The Phillips curve took center stage in macroeconomics because it offered a sort of policy menu that the policymakers could choose from. Economic advisors could simply present the latest data, and the president and Congress could just choose the combination of inflation and unemployment they thought was best. The theory was behind it, the data was behind it. By managing aggregate demand, we could manage the trade-off between the two, keeping the American economy healthy and growing. At least, that's how it seemed to people at the time.